The glass of ice water hit him square in the chest. For a moment, the entire restaurant went silent. The soft murmur of conversation, the clinking of fine china, the distant hum of the kitchen, it all stopped. Every pair of eyes turned to the dimly lit corner where he sat, his white button-down now soaked and clinging to his frame. Tom Cruise simply blinked, dabbing at his shirt with a napkin. He looked up at the waitress, her face twisted with irritation, her chest rising and falling as if she'd just run a marathon. And then, to everyone's shock, he smiled that it all started about an hour earlier. Tom wasn't the type to make a grand entrance. He walked into Elysian Grace, a fine dining restaurant nestled in the heart of Los Angeles, with no entourage, no reservations, and certainly no designer suit. Just a simple white button-down, slightly wrinkled, and a pair of worn jeans. His hair was tousled, a casual elegance about him that made him look more like an ordinary guy than an international movie star. But if there was one thing the hostess at the front, Samantha, prided herself on, it was recognizing status. And the moment she saw Tom Cruise step inside, she didn't. Instead, her sharp brown eyes darted to his shoes, well-worn leather loafers. She took in the lack of designer labels, the absence of a Rolex glinting from his wrist. Not exactly their usual clientele. "Good evening, sir," she greeted with a tight-lipped smile. "Do you have a reservation?" "Nope," Tom said easily, sliding his hands into his pockets. "Just looking for a quiet dinner." Her smile tightened further. "I see." Samantha flicked her gaze toward the main dining area, where real VIPs dined beneath golden chandeliers, their laughter blending into the soft notes of a live pianist. She knew exactly where Tom belonged, in her opinion. "Right this way," she said, grabbing a menu and leading him straight to the farthest, most undesirable table in the restaurant. Right near the kitchen doors. Tom didn't complain. Didn't argue. He just smiled, sat down, and unfolded the menu with a quiet nod of thanks. Samantha turned on her heel, her heels clicking against the polished wood floor as she whispered to the bartender, "Lucas." "He's totally lost," she muttered under her breath. "I give him 5 minutes before he realizes he can't afford anything here and walks out." Lucas frowned. "He seems fine to me." Samantha smirked. "We'll see." Except, Tom Cruise didn't leave. He sat there, completely unfazed, scanning the menu as if he did this every night. When Samantha returned, she leaned in slightly, her tone dripping with condescension. "Have you decided, sir?" Tom nodded. "Yeah, I'll have the Wagyu steak. Medium rare." Samantha almost choked. The Wagyu steak was one of the most expensive items on the menu. $400. Her perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched. "You do know it's $400, right?" Tom looked up at her, his blue eyes unreadable. "Yeah, I know." Silence. Samantha hesitated, waiting for him to flinch, to change his order, to suddenly realize he was in over his head. But he didn't. "All right then," she said, plastering on a fake smile. "I'll put that in for you." She stormed back toward the hostess stand, huffing in frustration. Lucas glanced at her. "He still hasn't left?" "No, but just wait." Samantha smirked. "I'll bet you anything he's going to panic when he sees the check." Lucas sighed. "Why do you care so much?" "Because," Samantha snapped, crossing her arms, "this place is for certain kinds of people. Not random nobodies who just walking off the street in." A soft chuckle interrupted her. She turned sharply to the center of the restaurant. Howard and Ellen Whitmore, an elderly couple who had been long-time regulars at Elysian Grace, had been watching the whole thing unfold. Howard, a silver-haired man with an air of quiet wisdom, chuckled again. "You really don't know who that is, do you?" Samantha's brows furrowed. "Who?" Ellen sipped her wine, an amused sparkle in her eye. "The man you just seated in the back like an unimportant guest." Samantha frowned. "Why? Is he some kind of—" And then it hit her, the easy confidence, the unbothered attitude. That face, her stomach dropped. "Oh my God," she whispered, blood draining from her face. Lucas smirked. "Yeah, that's Tom Cruise." Samantha's entire body locked up, and that's when she panicked. The next time she went to Tom's table, she fumbled the water pitcher. A little too much force, a little too much of her nerves getting the best of her. And before she could stop herself, splashed that ice-cold water straight onto Tom Cruise's chest. Gasps erupted across the restaurant. Someone actually shrieked that Samantha's soul left her body. She had just thrown water at Tom Cruise. But what happened next? That was what stunned everyone. Because instead of getting angry, instead of causing a scene, instead of storming out or calling the manager, Tom Cruise laughed. Laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world that he dabbed at his shirt with a napkin, his grin absolutely genuine. "No worries," he said. "I was getting kind of warm anyway." The entire restaurant went dead silent. Even Howard and Ellen looked stunned. Samantha wanted to die. Her hands were shaking. She had officially ruined her career. And that's when Anna, the restaurant manager, rushed over, looking pale as a ghost. "Mr. Cruise," she stammered. I'm so sorry. I had no idea you were dining with us tonight." Tom waved her off, still smiling. "It's all good," he said. "No need to make a big deal out of it." And that was the moment the entire restaurant realized Tom Cruise wasn't like the others. Samantha stood frozen, her heart pounding. She had just thrown a full glass of ice water onto Tom freaking Cruise. For a long moment, the restaurant was dead silent. The kind of silence that only happens right before something catastrophic unfolds. Tom, still seated, casually wiped at his soaked shirt with a napkin. His face was unreadable. Samantha braced herself for what she was sure would be an absolute disaster, that a celebrity losing his temper. A lawsuit. A viral scandal. Her entire career? Over. And then he laughed, not a scoff, not a fake, forced chuckle, but a genuine, full-bodied laugh, point one that echoed through the restaurant, bouncing off the chandeliers and polished wood floors. "Well," Tom said, looking down at his drenched shirt, "I was getting kind of warm anyway." The tension in the room shattered like glass, that a few guests gasped. Others exchanged stunned glances. And then Howard Whitmore, the silver-haired gentleman at the central table, actually started clapping at a slow, amused clap. His wife, Ellen, shook her head with a small chuckle, taking a sip of wine. "Unbelievable," she murmured. Samantha wanted the earth to swallow her whole. This couldn't be happening. This had to be some kind of fever dream. She opened her mouth to apologize, to beg for forgiveness. But nothing came out. Tom just smiled at her, that classic Hollywood grin that made him famous. "Seriously, don't worry about it," he said, dabbing his soaked shirt. "It's just water." Samantha couldn't breathe. Lucas, the bartender, was barely holding back a laugh. Anna, the restaurant manager, looked like she had just watched her life savings go up in flames. "Mr. Cruise," Anna started, her voice tight with panic. "I deeply apologize for." Tom waved her off before she could even finish. "Relax," he said, still grinning. "It was an accident." But that wasn't enough for Samantha. She couldn't let this slide. The entire restaurant had watched her make a complete fool of herself. Her reputation? In the toilet, she did the only thing she could think of. She grabbed a fresh napkin, leaned in toward Tom, and began dabbing at his chest. Big mistake. The moment she realized what she was doing, asterisk, her hands literally patting down Tom Cruise's shirt, asterisk, her stomach plummeted. She yanked her hands back like she had touched a hot stove. "Oh my God," she gasped. I didn't mean to." Tom looked at her, eyes twinkling with amusement. He said, clearly holding back another laugh. "You good?" Samantha wanted to die. Howard, at the central table, outright laughed. "You know, young lady," he said, shaking his head, "if you were trying to flirt, that might be the worst attempt I've ever seen." A few guests chuckled. Samantha felt actual heat rising to her face. I wasn't, Tom finally took pity on her. "Seriously," he said, still dripping wet, "it's all good. Accidents happen." But then something shifted, because now that the initial shock had passed, guests started whispering. And Samantha realized it wasn't just about the spilled water anymore. Reality crashed down on her. This entire night, she had treated Tom Cruise like an outsider. She had judged him. She had made assumptions about him, based on his clothes, his lack of a reservation, his quiet demeanor. And now, everyone in the restaurant knew it. She had humiliated herself, not because she spilled water, but because she had acted like an arrogant idiot toward one of the most famous men on the planet. She could feel the other guests watching her. She could hear their whispered conversations. She didn't even recognize him? How embarrassing. She tried to treat Tom Cruise like he wasn't worth her time. Lucas, the bartender, raised an eyebrow. Told you he was cool. Samantha's stomach twisted. She had messed up. Badly, Anna's expression said everything. The manager took Samantha aside, her voice low but firm. "What the hell were you thinking?" she hissed. Samantha opened her mouth, "But I don't want excuses," Anna snapped. "Do you have any idea what could have happened if he wasn't as forgiving as he is?" Samantha swallowed hard. "Do you think he's the kind of guy to run to the press?" Anna continued. "Because if he was, we'd be done." Samantha clenched her fists. She wanted to defend herself. She wanted to say she didn't know. But the truth, it wasn't about knowing that it was about the way she had treated him. She had let her assumptions get in the way of basic decency. And now, the whole restaurant had seen it. Tom was still unbothered. By the time Samantha returned to the dining room, Tom had gone back to his meal as if nothing had happened. He cut into his Wagyu steak, completely ignoring the fact that every other guest was still sneaking glances at him. Howard, still amused, leaned toward his wife. "You know," he said, "I think that man could sit through a hurricane and still come out smiling." Ellen chuckled. "It's called class." Lucas smirked from behind the bar. Meanwhile, Samantha stood at the edge of the room, frozen. She had a choice to make. She could run and hide, or she could own up to her mistake. Slowly, she stepped forward. She took a deep breath. And then, she walked straight toward Tom Cruise's table. The entire restaurant held its breath. Samantha stood there, hands clasped in front of her, feeling the weight of her own humiliation. She started, swallowing hard. Tom looked up. "I just wanted to say." She hesitated, her heart pounding. "I'm sorry." The whole restaurant stilled. And Tom just smiled at a warm, genuine smile. "Apology accepted," he said. And that was when the night truly changed. For the first time that night, Samantha felt small. She had walked up to Tom Cruise's table, fully prepared to be ignored, dismissed, or, even worse, mocked. Instead, he smiled. Genuinely. "Apology accepted," he had said. And just like that, he went back to his meal, completely unbothered, as Samantha's heart was still pounding. She had spent the entire night judging him. She had treated him like an outsider. She had quite literally thrown water on him. And yet he was sitting there, cool as ever, slicing into his Wagyu steak like nothing had happened. For a moment, she just stood there, feeling the weight of her own embarrassment. And then she did something she hadn't done all night. She actually looked at him, not just as some guy who didn't belong, not as someone who couldn't afford this place, just as a person. And for the first time, she realized she had been so wrong. Meanwhile, the entire restaurant was still watching. Samantha could feel the whispers. She could sense the quiet amusement from Howard and Ellen Whitmore at the center table. She could see Lucas, the bartender, watching with that "I told you so" smirk. Even Anna, the manager, had stepped aside, her arms crossed as she observed the moment unfold. Samantha had been so sure that Tom Cruise would react like any other celebrity, that he'd be angry, that he'd demand special treatment, that he'd use his status to make her life miserable. Instead, he was showing her something completely unexpected: grace. And that made it even worse, because now she wasn't the victim. She was the one who had messed up. She had been the snob. She had been the one acting like she was better than him. And now, she had to sit with that realization. Lucas finally broke the silence. He slid over from the bar, raising an eyebrow at her. "You okay?" he asked under his breath. Samantha swallowed. I don't know." Lucas smirked. "Yeah, that tracks." She shot him a glare. "Not helping." "Hey," Lucas shrugged. "You kind of dug this hole yourself." Samantha groaned, rubbing her forehead. Lucas leaned against the bar, glancing over at Tom. "You know what's wild?" Samantha sighed. "What?" "He never once pulled the 'don't you know who I am' card." That made her stomach twist, because he was right. Tom Cruise could have made a scene, that he could have humiliated her in return. Instead, he just sat there, enjoying his meal, completely unfazed. And that somehow made it worse, because it meant that Samantha had treated him like garbage for no reason. Not because he was rude, not because he was demanding, just because she had assumed he didn't belong. She closed her eyes, exhaling shakily. "Lucas, yeah, I think I just had a life-altering realization." Lucas grinned. Yeah, it looked painful. Anna finally stepped in. The manager walked over, her heels clicking against the polished wood floor. Samantha, she said quietly. Samantha tensed. Yeah. Anna's sharp eyes studied her for a long moment. Then she sighed. Come with me. Oh no, Samantha's stomach plummeted. She cast one last glance at Tom, who was still casually eating his steak, blissfully unaware of the crisis happening in her soul. Then she followed Anna toward the back office. The talk. The door shut behind them, muffling the restaurant noise. Samantha stood stiffly, hands clasped in front of her, bracing for impact. Anna sat on the edge of her desk, arms crossed. Tell me what went wrong tonight, she said. Samantha hesitated. I didn't recognize him. Anna's eyes narrowed. That's not what went wrong. Samantha's face burned. Anna sighed, rubbing her temples. Samantha, this isn't about whether or not you knew who he was. It's about the way you treated him before you knew. Samantha winced, because that was the problem, wasn't it? Anna exhaled. I don't run this restaurant for the elite, Samantha. I run it for people who love good food. The fact that you let a man's shoes dictate his worth. Her voice hardened. That's unacceptable. Samantha swallowed. I get that now. Anna stared at her. Do you? Samantha opened her mouth, then closed it. Because honestly, she wasn't sure. She had spent so many years learning how to judge customers the moment they walked in that it was practically a survival skill. But tonight had proven she had been dead wrong. Finally, she exhaled. I think I'm starting to. Anna studied her. Then, after a long pause, she nodded. Good, she said. Because this is your wake-up call. Samantha nodded quickly. I understand. Good. Anna leaned back slightly. Now, how are you going to fix it? Samantha blinked. Fix it? She repeated. Anna raised an eyebrow. You think you're just going to walk back out there and pretend this never happened? Samantha's stomach dropped. I don't know, she admitted. Then figure it out, Anna said simply. Samantha nodded. Then she turned and walked back toward the dining room, her heart pounding. Back in the restaurant, Tom Cruise had finished his meal. He was sitting back in his chair, chatting quietly with Howard and Ellen Whitmore. Samantha hesitated. She could just let this moment pass. She could clear his plate, let him leave, and hope the memory of tonight faded. She could do what Anna had said. Fix it. Taking a deep breath, she walked over to his table. Tom looked up, his expression calm. Hey, she said softly. I just wanted to, I don't know, do something. Tom tilted his head, waiting. Samantha reached in her apron pocket, pulling out a small slip of paper. She placed it on the table in front of him. Tom raised an eyebrow. What's this? She hesitated. Then, a free dessert, she said. On the house. For, the whole me throwing water on you thing. Tom stared at the slip. Then he grinned. Well, he said, picking up the paper, I do love dessert. Samantha let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. For the first time all night, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could turn this around. But the night wasn't over yet, because in about 5 minutes, something was going to happen, something that would change everything. And this time, it wasn't about Samantha. It was about Tom Cruise and what he was about to do next. Samantha finally felt like she had done something to make up for the disaster of the night, a free dessert. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. Tom had grinned when she placed the slip on the table, and for the first time that evening, she felt a little less like a terrible person. But just when she thought she could finally breathe, something happened, something none of them saw coming. Howard Whitmore was the first to notice. The elderly gentleman had been watching the whole thing unfold from his table. As Samantha and Tom exchanged those final words, Howard's sharp eyes flickered toward the entrance. His smile faded, because just then the doors to Elysian Grace swung open, and in stepped 2 men. Not diners, not guests, but men in suits, the wrong kind of suits, not designer tuxedos, not tailored business attire, security. Samantha barely noticed at first. She was too busy trying to compose herself, still reeling from the emotional roller coaster of the last hour. But then she heard it. The shift in energy, the whispers, the way the bartender, Lucas, suddenly tensed behind the bar. And then the soft, yet firm click of a radio. Something was off. Tom noticed. He noticed before anyone else. His easygoing demeanor didn't change, but his eyes did that a flicker of awareness. A subtle straightening of his posture. Samantha followed his gaze, finally seeing what everyone else had noticed. The two men in black suits, standing just inside the entrance, scanning the restaurant. Not looking at a table, not looking for a waiter, looking for someone that Samantha's stomach tightened. Something about them felt wrong. Not like bodyguards, not like high-profile security for a VIP. Something else? And then, one of them locked eyes with Tom. For the first time that night, Samantha saw a change in him. That a shift, subtle but unmistakable. Tom had been calm all night, unshakable. But the moment that man in the suit looked at him, his expression changed. Not fear, not anger, but calculating, like he was piecing something together in real time. Howard leaned forward slightly, murmuring to his wife, "Ellen, something's not right." Ellen nodded, her grip on her wine glass tightening. Samantha, standing beside Tom's table, felt frozen. What the hell was happening? Then, the taller man in the suit took a step forward. "Mr. Cruz," he said, voice smooth but firm, "I believe it's time for you to leave." A heavy silence fell over the restaurant. Every single diner stilled. Anna, the manager, took an instinctive step forward, her brow furrowed. "I'm sorry. Who are you?" she asked. The second man flashed a badge to Samantha's heart slammed against her ribs. The letters on the badge were bold, unmistakable. FBI. The entire restaurant went dead silent. Samantha felt the floor tilt beneath her. FBI? Here, for Tom Cruise? She barely processed the next few seconds because suddenly, everyone was watching him. Howard, Ellen, Lucas, Anna. The entire restaurant held its breath. But Tom just sighed, like this was nothing new, like this was just another Wednesday, that he took one last bite of his steak, chewed carefully, then set his fork down with a quiet clink. Finally, he leaned back in his chair and looked at the agents. His tone was casual, almost bored. "Let me guess," he said. "This is about the thing in Italy?" Samantha's brain officially stopped working. "What? The thing in Italy? The FBI wanted Tom Cruise for something that happened in Italy. What the hell?" Lucas, standing behind the bar, actually dropped the glass he was holding. It shattered against the floor. The agents didn't flinch. "Sir," the taller agent said, ignoring the question, "we need you to come with us." Samantha turned to Tom, fully expecting him to ask for a lawyer, or demand an explanation, or at least react like a normal person. Instead, he just chuckled. He ran a hand through his still slightly wet hair and muttered, "Well, that didn't take long." Then he stood up. The entire room watched, and no one moved, and no one breathed as Samantha's legs felt like jelly. Tom Cruise was getting arrested. Right here. Right now that I in her restaurant. After she had just spent the entire night humiliating herself in front of him. The first agent reached for his wrist. And then Tom took a perfectly timed step back. His voice was calm, steady. "Before we go," he said, "I just have one question." The agents paused. The taller one narrowed his eyes. "Make it quick." Tom's gaze sharpened. He tilted his head slightly, his famous movie star smirk finally making an appearance. Then he asked one single question, a question that made the entire restaurant gasp, a question that changed everything. "Which one of you is the mole?" The room erupted. Howard gasped. Ellen clutched her pearls. Lucas mouthed, "What the F?" Samantha just stared. "What did he just say?" The agent stiffened at a fraction of a second, barely noticeable, but Tom saw it. And that's when he knew, that's when everyone knew. Tom Cruise wasn't just being arrested. Tom Cruise was playing a game none of them understood. And in exactly 30 seconds, he was about to turn the tables completely. For exactly 3 seconds, nobody moved. The restaurant was frozen, that Tom's words hung in the air like a live grenade, waiting to go off. "Which one of you is the mole?" The two FBI agents didn't even blink. But Tom saw it. The slight twitch of a jaw. The way the taller one's fingers tightened ever so slightly around his badge, that IT was subtle. But not subtle enough that Samantha's brain was short-circuiting. She had spent the entire night thinking Tom Cruise was just some random guy, a laid-back celebrity who just wanted dinner. Now, she was watching him call out the FBI in the middle of a restaurant. With a straight face, Lucas, the bartender, whispered under his breath. What the actual? Howard Whitmore leaned toward his wife, Ellen, his eyes twinkling. Ellen, my dear, he murmured, I think we're about to witness something spectacular. Ellen, still clutching her wine glass in a death grip, just nodded. The agents didn't react. Not immediately. But Samantha saw the way they stiffened, how they shifted, like two men who had just been exposed. The taller agent finally spoke, voice clipped. Mr. Cruz, we don't have time for this. Tom took a slow step forward, his movements measured. You're right, he said, voice cool. We don't. His eyes locked onto the shorter agent, the one who hadn't spoken yet, the one who had been too quiet. You're new, Tom said, tilting his head. Aren't you? The second agent's lips parted just slightly. Samantha saw it. That split second of hesitation. Tom saw it too. And that's when everything changed. The trap snapped shut, in a blur of movement. Tom reached forward, fast, faster than Samantha even thought possible. And in the blink of an eye, he grabbed the second agent's wrist. Not violently, not aggressively, precisely. The agent's eyes widened. And Tom, smiling now, flipped over the man's wrist, revealing a tiny silver bracelet a bracelet with a logo. Not an FBI logo. Samantha didn't recognize it. But Tom did, and so did the first agent, because the moment he saw it, the taller agent's hand shot toward his gun. But Tom was already moving. Chaos. Before the taller agent could even pull his weapon, Tom spun the second agent around, twisting his arm behind his back. The guy let out a sharp grunt. Tom, completely unbothered, looked over at the first agent. Now let's all take a deep breath, yeah, he said, voice smooth as ever. The entire restaurant was dead silent. Every diner, every waiter, every bartender, everyone was watching. Samantha felt like she was about to pass out. Lucas had both hands on the bar, gripping it like a man hanging off a ledge. Howard looked positively delighted. Ellen? She just whispered, oh my God, like she was watching the climax of a spy movie. And honestly, she kind of was. Who the hell was Tom Cruise? The taller agent. The real FBI agent. Had his hand hovering dangerously close to his weapon. But he hadn't drawn it. Not yet, because now he was unsure his partner, the man standing in Tom Cruise's grip, wasn't FBI. That much was clear. But who was he? Samantha's breath caught as Tom spoke again. You see, he said conversationally, when you've been in the business as long as I have, you learn a thing or two about people. The imposter agent stayed frozen. Tom grinned. And the moment you walked in here, he continued, I knew something was off. He turned to the real agent. Because you, sir, Tom said, nodding at him, are FBI. He squeezed the fake agent's arm slightly. But him? He's something else entirely. Silence. Then, the real FBI agent cursed under his breath. He reached for his radio. Control, we've got a breach, he said, his voice tense. Repeat. The suspect is. Before he could finish, the fake agent made his move that a fight breaks out in Elysian grace. Everything happened too fast. The imposter lunged. Not at Tom, that at the real agent. His free hand shot toward his belt, a blade flashing that Samantha's breath caught. Tom just sighed, and in one smooth motion, he twisted the man's arm, sent the knife clattering to the floor, and swept his legs out from under him. The imposter hit the ground hard. Tom immediately stepped back, hands up. All right, he said, exhaling. That was unnecessary. The real agent wasted no time, that he pulled his weapon. A standard issue Glock. And trained it on the man now groaning on the floor. You move, the agent growled, and I swear to God, the imposter didn't move. He was too busy gasping for air. Samantha was gripping the nearest chair like it was the only thing keeping her upright, because she had just watched Tom Cruise take down an undercover operative in less than 5 seconds. With one hand, the aftermath. The real agent pressed a hand to his earpiece. We got him, he muttered. Tom dusted off his hands. Well, he said, that was fun. The entire restaurant was still dead silent. Samantha was still trying to process reality. Lucas, behind the bar, just whispered the words that were on everyone's minds. Tom Cruise is a freaking ninja. Howard finally let out a loud, hearty laugh. Ellen downed the rest of her wine. Anna, the manager, looked like she was reconsidering every life choice that led her to this moment. And Tom? Tom just grinned. Well, he said, looking down at the unconscious imposter, I should probably get going. The FBI agent gave him a long look. Then he sighed. Yeah, the agent muttered. Before I have to explain how a Hollywood actor solved my case for me. Tom clapped him on the shoulder. You'll get him next time, champ. Then he turned toward Samantha. She froze, his blue eyes locked onto hers. And then he winked. Thanks for the water, he said. Then just like that, he walked out. And Samantha, she stood there still gripping the chair, watching Tom Cruise leave her restaurant with a trail of absolute chaos behind him. Elysian Grace would never forget this night. Neither would she, because she had spent the whole evening judging a man she didn't understand. And in the end, she had no freaking clue who he really was. All she knew was, next time Tom Cruise walked in her restaurant, she was never underestimating him. Again.